51 senators just voted to keep America's darkest secrets buried. Not rumors, not conspiracy theories. Actual files that could expose how power, money, and corruption collided around one of the most disturbing scandals in modern history. For decades, people whispered about who was connected to Jeffrey Epstein. Tonight, we're not whispering. We're asking one question. Why is Washington still protecting the people who might be hiding inside those files? The Senate had the chance to make history, to open the doors of transparency, to show that justice doesn't stop where money begins. Senator Jeff Merkley literally sprinted up the Capitol steps to cast his vote, believing the chamber might finally side with victims over power.
Detailing the names of those connected to Mr. Jeffrey Epstein. It's been widely reported that in May, our Attorney General, Pam Bondi, informed President Trump that his name appears in the Epstein files. But to be clear, just because a name is listed in the Epstein files doesn't mean that that person was a collaborator in abusing young women. There may be lots of names in that file related to just casual acquaintances or people met on trips, who knows? But some of those names in that file may well shine light on people who abused young women. So let's bring it to light. If we believe in that vision of equal justice under law, if we believe in accountability for all, then release the files. Let the chips fall where they may. It is the right thing to do. Everyone involved in assisting Jeffrey Epstein in running an international trafficking organization or involved in directly purchasing access to young women through Jeffrey Epstein or directly abusing young women proffered by Jeffrey Epstein, every single person, let the chips fall where they may. No matter how rich the person is, no matter if they held office in the past, no matter if they aspired office in the future or sit in office right now, no matter how famous or not famous they might be, let the chips fall where they may. That's the vision of equal justice under the law. Everyone involved in Mr. Epstein's crimes must be brought to light and must be held accountable. My colleague from Oregon, Senator Ron Wyden, and the Senate Finance Committee have been investigating Mr. Epstein's financial network for the last 3 years. The Biden administration fully cooperated with the Senate investigators on that case. The Finance Committee staff went to the Treasury Department to see the Epstein files and suspicious activity reports. Democrats understood that this was an ongoing investigation. We applauded the Biden administration for cooperating, and that was the right course. But now we're under a different administration. Instead of cooperating, the Trump administration is obstructing. The Trump administration and Attorney General Bondi are refusing to cooperate, and they are refusing to investigate further. They're simply saying 2 words: case closed. Case closed? When they have their hands on information potentially regarding dozens or hundreds of individuals who abused young women. So today we had a chance to vote on whether the case is closed. We had before us an amendment which said, deliver the files. Create the force of law, deliver the files. And 51 senators in this body, I am ashamed to say, said, hell no. We want them kept secret. We want to protect the perpetrators. Why? Because the man in the Oval Office, Mr. Trump, told us he wants us to protect those files, does not want them public. On July 17th, the Wall Street Journal reported on a letter allegedly written by Trump to Epstein as part of a birthday book for his 50th birthday in 2003. The letter is signed at the bottom, Donald. It features a drawing of a woman's body with very suggestive text. I debated putting that letter up. There's a chart of it in the door behind me, but it's already been made public. The public has seen it. I find it profoundly offensive letter. And as I passed by a stack of newspapers today, I saw a series of examples of Donald Trump's signature because Trump has said to the world, it's not my signature. But of course, the experts say that's not true. The birthday book contains another photo of Mr. Epstein holding an oversized novelty check from DJ Trump for $22,500. What is that check for? Underneath the photo, taken in the 1990s, a handwritten note says, quote, Jeffrey showing early talents with money and women, sells fully depreciated, and then there's a name of a woman who's been blocked out to Donald Trump for $22,500. I don't know if a woman was sold to Donald Trump for $22,500. I don't know what it means to call a woman fully depreciated. I don't know if it was just kind of a brazen joke between a couple of very powerful men, but it's certainly not a funny joke. It certainly implies and suggests a camaraderie in the idea that young women are for sale. On July 15th, House Speaker Mike Johnson told CNN, we should put everything out there and let the people decide it. Well, actions are more powerful than words. The words were, we should put everything out there. The action was he adjourned the House of Representatives early for August recess to avoid voting on release of the files. Well, the House is back in session now. So I call on Speaker Mike Johnson to stand up for the principle carved above those pillars on the Supreme Court, equal justice under law, hold a vote in the House of Representatives on release of the files. The leader of the Senate told Fox News, I always am a believer in transparency. I think more is always better. Today we voted on transparency, and the vote from across the aisle was case closed, no transparency, no accountability. I certainly agree with the sentiment. It's time to put everything out there. The American people have been clear. They want these files released because they still treasure the idea that possibly powerful people in this chamber actually believe in the principles that we were raised on here in the United States of America of equal justice under law, that nobody is above the law. Still cherish that little seed of hope that maybe when we have a vote in this chamber.
The proposal was simple. Release the Epstein files, redact the victims' names for safety, and let the truth stand on its own. Yet when the moment came, the Senate turned away. 51 senators said, keep them sealed. 51 chose secrecy over sunlight. But why? What could possibly be so dangerous that half of Congress would rather protect it than expose it? Merkley's speech hit the floor like a thunderclap. He pointed to four words carved into the marble of the Supreme Court: equal justice under law. He reminded his colleagues that those words weren't meant to be decorative. They were supposed to mean something. He asked, does equal justice still exist when the rich walk free and survivors are silenced? For a brief moment, the room went still. Everyone knew what he meant. Because this vote wasn't just about one man's crimes. It was about whether America still believes no one is above the law. But the silence didn't last. The procedural whispers started, and once again the truth was swallowed by politics. For years, the Department of Justice held Epstein's files, records that could finally explain how his network operated, who enabled it, and how he managed to evade real accountability for so long. Under the previous administration, the Senate Finance Committee gained access to some of those materials through official cooperation. Investigators examined suspicious wire transfers, corporate shells, and private jet manifests that painted a picture far larger than anyone imagined. But that cooperation stopped cold. The new Attorney General shut the door, claiming the case was closed, even as new evidence suggested it was anything but. Case closed became the shield for the powerful, a way to bury uncomfortable truths beneath legal jargon. Inside those sealed boxes are thousands of pages, bank records, travel logs, internal memos, plea deals, and non-prosecution agreements. They aren't gossip, they're evidence trails. Some of the names inside are probably innocent, caught in the orbit of someone toxic. Others might not be, but we'll never know which is which while the files remain hidden. That's the point. Without sunlight, suspicion festers and justice rots. Merkley's amendment would have protected victims and active investigations, but it would have forced everything else into the light. Instead, the Senate voted to keep the public in the dark. And as cameras rolled, a handful of senators actually cheered. Imagine that, celebrating secrecy in a democracy built on accountability. Then came the stories. Old documents resurfaced. A handwritten note, an odd sketch, a photo from decades ago that hinted at just how close Epstein was to circles of power. Reporters described private exchanges that blurred the line between arrogance and depravity. Whether those artifacts prove guilt or just reveal a culture of impunity almost doesn't matter. They show the mindset, the comfort powerful people felt joking about things that ruined lives. The laughter, the nicknames, the casual references to depreciated assets. For survivors, those words land like a punch. Because behind every joke was a real person, someone who would never fully heal. That Merkley's plea wasn't about headlines or vendettas. It was about principle. He reminded his colleagues that the phrase equal justice isn't conditional. It doesn't depend on wealth or office or fame. Yet that day, the Senate acted as though it did. Even leaders who had publicly promised transparency reversed themselves when it mattered. They said they supported releasing the files, then voted to bury them. On camera, they spoke of accountability. Off camera, they counted votes and followed orders. That kind of hypocrisy erodes more than trust. It tells every survivor watching that power still protects itself, what's actually in these so-called Epstein files. They're a mosaic of evidence gathered by multiple agencies, investigative summaries, grand jury excerpts, transaction records, travel manifests, and communications about charging decisions. Some sections likely document how plea bargains and immunity deals were arranged years ago, deals that let key figures escape scrutiny. Other portions may reveal networks, who flew with whom, who transferred money where, who intervened to make investigations disappear. It's not about confirming every rumor. It's about understanding how such a system functioned in plain sight. Transparency is the only way to learn from it and prevent it from happening again. Opponents of the release claim they're protecting privacy or national security. But Merkley's proposal already addressed that victims' names would be redacted, ongoing investigations safeguarded, anything endangering national interests withheld. What remained would expose only one thing: abuse of power. And that's precisely what makes so many people nervous. Because when reputations are built on secrecy, truth becomes a threat. For survivors, that vote felt like another betrayal. Many spent years trying to be heard, fighting trauma and disbelief. They watched as the people who should have defended them instead argued for procedural caution. Caution for whom? Certainly not for the young women whose lives were shattered. Caution served only the powerful. One survivor told reporters that every time the government hides another file, it feels like being silenced all over again. And when the nation sees that, faith in justice erodes. Because if the system can protect predators with connections, what hope do ordinary people have? There's also a deeper cost. When secrecy wins, cynicism spreads. Citizens start assuming every investigation is rigged, every headline is spin, every leader is complicit. That cynicism becomes poison. It eats away at the idea of equal justice until nothing's left but outrage and apathy. The institutions meant to protect us can't survive that kind of rot. Transparency isn't just moral, it's strategic. It restores a measure of trust. It tells the public, we have nothing to hide except the names of victims, and everything else will be known. That kind of openness doesn't weaken law enforcement, it strengthens it. Imagine what real accountability could look like. Journalists following the money trails, independent investigators connecting dots long ignored, survivors finally seeing confirmation that their stories were documented and believed. Every piece of information released would help close the gap between rumor and fact. It would also test the integrity of those in power. Because once the files are public, there's no hiding behind procedure, no pretending you didn't know. The truth would stand on its own. But instead of that moment of reckoning, the Senate chose comfort. They chose the path that spares embarrassment over the path that delivers justice. Merkley warned them on the floor, one day, you'll have to decide whose side you're on, the side of the powerful or the side of the victims. That day came, and 51 senators failed the test. Some may try to explain it away as legal prudence or due process, but history will remember it as cowardice. Because justice delayed is justice denied, and they delayed it on purpose. The amendment they killed wasn't reckless. It was crafted with law enforcement input, designed to balance transparency with protection. It ordered the Attorney General to release all Epstein-related materials, flight records, financial documents, communications, deals, settlements, everything except identifying details of victims and anything jeopardizing an active investigation. It explicitly forbade withholding records for reasons like embarrassment, reputational harm, or political sensitivity. That language was intentional. It anticipated the very excuses used to hide the truth. All it asked was that sunlight be the rule, not the exception. When that measure failed, Merkley didn't back down. He closed his speech with a challenge to his colleagues. Search your conscience, reconsider, and come back to vote the right way. He reminded them that history doesn't forget who stood for victims and who stood for secrecy. Outside the chamber, advocates were already mobilizing, demanding the vote be revisited. Across social media, the message spread, transparency is not negotiable. Citizens began calling offices, signing petitions, and asking one simple question. What are they afraid of? This fight is no longer about one scandal. It's about whether democracy has the courage to look itself in the mirror. The phrase equal justice under law isn't a slogan. It's supposed to be a promise. A promise that the law will not bend for power or status. And yet, with each sealed document, that promise weakens. Every redacted name without explanation, every blocked subpoena, every case closed press release chips away at the foundation of accountability. The victims deserved better. The public deserved better. America deserved better. If you're watching this, understand that justice doesn't move on its own. It moves because people demand it. Call your representatives. Tell them you support the release of the Epstein-related records with only the necessary redactions for victims and ongoing cases. Demand transparency. Support journalists and organizations still fighting to uncover the truth. Share the story so others know that secrecy isn't neutrality, it's complicity. The more people speak up, the harder it becomes for leaders to hide behind procedure. In the end, this is bigger than any one case. It's about whether the phrase carved into the Supreme Court still has meaning. Whether power can silence truth indefinitely. Whether we, as citizens, will accept a justice system that protects the few at the expense of the many. Merkley's question still echoes. Do we really believe in equal justice under law? The Senate's vote answered one way. The rest of us can answer another. Because secrecy may have won this round, but sunlight has a way of finding cracks. The victims deserve the full truth, and the country deserves leaders unafraid of it. If you believe transparency matters, share this video, keep the pressure on, and don't let this story fade. Subscribe, like, and stay with us as we follow every twist in the fight to make the files public, because only when the truth is out can justice finally begin.